Well, good morning and welcome.
Good morning.
Glad to see you. I always am. I want you to think about that and always remember it. It's crucial. Had kid poured, curd, pulled cob.
For sure.
Sure. According to MIT researchers, this is the most difficult tongue twister in the American language. Virtually impossible to recite quickly in 10 consecutive ways. So you could spend the rest of the lesson just proving me wrong and right, but I kind of wish you wouldn't. Our mouth has the capability to do some pretty wonderful things, but it has some sincere and obvious restrictions as well. I mean, there aren't many days that go by that I don't say, me and my big mouth. What was I thinking? Sandy will just give me this incredulous look. Like, did you just hear yourself? And I'll deny it every time. But that's because the tongue is a difficult thing to master. And I can say that with confidence because nobody's ever been able to. Nobody has ever been able to. Our tongue is very much like a trunk on an elephant. It is wrapped with 8 muscles that work independently of your skeleton. Only muscle on your body that does that. And it is filled with disease. Awful, you don't want me to tell you. But here I go anyway. I mean, your mouth is gross. In 1 drop of saliva, there's over 1 million potentially harmful bacteria. In 1 drop. Only our lower intestines and urinary tract have more bacteria than our mouths have. Now, in studying for this lesson, I was talking to my youngest granddaughter, who I was just told got a boyfriend. And that's not the worst of it. The boy is the preacher's kid where they go. And I know how that can work out. And so I spent a great deal of time telling them about how nasty boys' mouths are. This whole idea of kissing forget COVID. The real danger is in kissing. She promised that she heard me, but I know she did. I know she did. Our tongues are unique to us. The ingrained texture of our tongues is as specific as is our fingerprints. And the reality of our life is that God knew exactly how difficult it would be for us to make the right choice. And the choice is simply this. When you open your mouth, will you curse or will you bless? It really is that simple. When you open your mouth, when I open my mouth, I have a fundamental choice. Am I going to curse or am I going to bless? Now, the writer of the Hebrew letter talks a lot about this subject, but I'll direct our attention just to chapter 3. Notice with me verses 3 through 6. You there with me? Hebrews 3 through 6.
James.
You see, your mouth can do anything. Curse, bless. I absolutely know it's James. What do you think? Do you think I'm new at this? James chapter 3, 3 through 6. It wasn't looking familiar, but I was going to go with it anyway. All right. When we put bits into the mouths of horses to make them obey us, we can turn the whole animal. Or take ships as an example. Although they are so large and are driven by strong winds, they are steered by a very small rudder wherever the pilot wants to go. Likewise, the tongue is a small part of the body, but it makes great boasts. Consider what a great forest is set on fire by a small spark. The tongue also is a fire, a world of evil among the parts of the body. It corrupts the whole body, sets the whole course of one's life on fire, and it itself set on fire by hell. By hell. So it's not difficult then for us to believe that it's true that very often our tongues work independent of our minds. But the truer thing is this: our tongues betray our heart. There is a direct connection between what you say and the condition of your heart. That connection is the only reason why James could speak as he does. It is, in fact, deadly. The psalmist in 141 verse 3 said, "Set a guard, O Lord, over my mouth. Keep watch over the door of my lips." Matthew 12 and 37. "By your own words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned." The book of James is like the book of Proverbs in the Old Testament. It really is. When you read through it, you find these sentences of life-changing truth. So poetic are they that the book of James is pretty easy to commit to our memories, because each phrase is just so absolutely true that none of us possibly could deny it. In Proverbs chapter 18 and verse 21, it says, "Life and death are in the power of the tongue." Life and death are in the power of the tongue. And, think of it like this. How many wars could have been stopped if they'd been stopped at the talking stage? Know what I mean? Every war that has ever occurred began as a war of words. Began as a war of words. What would have happened if somebody had taken just a moment of introspection and said, "What is my choice? Cursing or blessing? What is my choice?" How many millions of lives would have been changed if that had happened? The Oxford English Dictionary says there are 170,000 English words. 170,000 English words. And yet the Guardian newspaper indicates that the average speaker only uses 12,000. There are 170,000, but we only use about 12,000. Now, that might be all right, because I don't know that we use those 12,000 all that well. But for Jeff, it wouldn't be a bad thing to have more options. I remember when my daughter-in-law, Elizabeth, first came from Brazil and was learning English. I remember she would say the most cutting, inappropriate things. And she's the sweetest thing that ever lived. She is so precious, but she could just absolutely tear you apart with what she said. And so finally, in my wisdom, when I decided it was my turn to criticize rather than to bless, I sat her down and I said, "Honey, you should not talk that way. Why did you say it?" And she said, "Dad," she said, You have hundreds of words for every one word I know. You have hundreds of choices, but I only know one for that. And so immediately I began to realize that hers was not the tongue problem, mine was. As usual. As usual. We don't use anywhere near the vocabulary that is available to us. Which, again, and let me just say this by way of the movies you watch on TV, do people use that word really that much? Maybe I don't get out enough. Maybe I don't get out. And you know the word I'm talking about. It is difficult to watch a movie where that isn't said, like hello.
Right.
You know the word.
Yeah.
I don't need to tell you the word. You know the word. I guess I'm just not with it. I'm not woke like I should be. But it seems in the unlimited vocabulary we seem to have that we could expand it a little bit, at least when it comes to that. Genesis chapter 12. I want you to notice the blessing that God gives Abraham. Genesis chapter 12, verses 1 through 3. Notice this. Now remember, we got a choice. I got a choice. I can curse or I can bless. But listen to what God does. In Genesis chapter 12, verse 1, the Lord had said to Abram, "Go from your country, your people, your father's household, to the land I will show you. And I'll make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I'll make your name great, and you'll be a blessing. I'll bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all peoples on earth will be blessed through you." All peoples on earth will be blessed through you. And God is as good as his word. Because we read of Abraham while he's lying on his deathbed in Genesis 24 and verse 1, that Abraham was blessed in every way. He was blessed in every way. As you break down this blessing, it's a beautiful thing. God says into the ears of Abraham, I'm going to make you a great nation. I will bless you. I'll make your name great. And you shall be a blessing to others. And I'll bless even those who bless you. And I'll protect you. Because I'll curse those who curse you. And in all of the families of the earth, they will be blessed directly, Abraham, because of you. What a marvelous thing. What a marvelous thing. It's one of those moments in your life when somebody said something to you that made you feel so good about yourself. You know what I mean? You took that as a treasure and you put that in your heart. And when you messed up and when you sinned, you thought to yourself, well, at least that time I didn't mess up. At least that time somebody saw me as being a good person, as somebody who's trying. You're going to hear a lot of junk today. You're going to hear a lot of, throughout this day, you're going to hear a lot of junk. You won't be able to go to the restaurant when they're out hearing people say things that absolutely are of no benefit to you whatsoever. You're going to hear a lot that you're going to wish you could forget. And that's going to happen in just 24 hours. But not with the next words I say. Not with the next words I say. This is a longer reading than I normally do in sermons because our attention span is difficult. It is a difficult. But I wish you would listen. The Celtic Saints, when they went into battle during the Crusades, a particular general within those saints had a shield. And on the shield, he had the following words printed. So that shield went before him into every battle he ever went into. And as I begin to read you this blessing, I want you to realize how good it is for you to hear. And how for you to apply it to yourself is absolutely appropriate and important. I want you to think about these words because of all the crud you're going to hear. This isn't one of them. Listen, on the shield, he said this. I bind to myself today the strong virtue of the invocation of the Trinity. I believe the Trinity is the unity, the creator of the universe. I bind to myself today the virtue of the incarnation of Christ and his baptism, the virtue of his crucifixion with his burial, the virtue of his resurrection with his ascension, the virtue of his coming on the judgment day. I bind these things to myself today. The virtue of the love of the seraphim, and the obedience of angels, and the hope of a resurrection, in prayers of the patriarchs, and predictions of the prophets, in the preaching of the apostles, in faith of the confessors, in purity, in deeds of righteous men. I bind to myself today the very power of heaven, the brightness of the moon, the splendor of fire, the flashing of lightning, the swiftness of the wind, the depth of the sea, the stability of the earth, the compactness of rocks. I bind to myself today God's power to guide me, God's might to uphold me, God's wisdom to teach me, God's eye to watch over me, God's ear to hear me, God's word to give me speech, God's hand to guide me, God's way to lie before me, God's shield to shelter me, God's host to secure me against the snares of demons, against the seductions of vices, against the lusts of nature, against everyone who mediates injury upon me, whether near or far, whether few or with many. I invoke today all of these virtues against hostile, merciless enemies, which may assail my body and my soul, against the incantations of false prophets, against the black lies of heathens, against the false laws of heresy, against the deceits of idolatry, against the spells of the wizards, against every knowledge that binds to the soul of men. Christ protects me today against every poison, against burning, against drowning, against a death wound, that I may receive abundant reward. Christ with me, Christ before me, Christ behind me, Christ within me, Christ beneath me, Christ above me, Christ at my right, Christ at my left, Christ in the fort, Christ in the chariot seat, Christ in the poop deck, Christ in the heart of anyone who thinks of me, Christ in the mouth of everyone who speaks of me, Christ in every eye that sees me, Christ in every ear that hears me. I bind to myself today the strong virtue of the invocation of the Trinity. I believe in God, the creator of the universe, and I bind this on me today. So I don't know how much junk you're going to hear this week, but that wasn't one of them. That wasn't one of them. How would your life change if you took the 2 or 3 minutes to have this as your vow and prayer every single morning when you wake up? It's exactly 2.5 pages, 1 line. Well, how would your life change if you lived every day beginning with this invocation of truth? Because you see, we all make choices when we open our mouth. The choice to curse or the choice to bless. And beyond that, we also make choices as to who we listen to. And folks, there are people in your life right now you would do better if you didn't listen to them. Right? Amen. Do you have anybody in your life, as you think back objectively and you say to yourself, I really shouldn't listen to that. I really shouldn't listen to that. We can curse or we can bless, or we can criticize. I do a lot. Samuel, I'm just pretty type A about a lot of stuff. And it is to my shame that I can be that way. Because really, criticism is your choice. And too often I choose to do that. And that's something that this mouth is trying to work on. Because it's hurt me and it's hurt others. But let me tell you something about what you say to me. Very often people don't need anybody else to criticize them. We want to do it, don't we? And we say it's for their own good, right? But very often, people don't need a curse from you. And I'll tell you why. Because the curse they say to themselves is far worse than anything you can say to them. That very person that you decide to set straight, that one who you decide to cut down, that person that you decide to put in their place, has done it to themselves that day already. And they've been harder on themselves than anything you say. So the question that we have is, when we open our mouths, are we going to bless or are we going to curse? But the good news is Jesus, you see. Jesus has always been good news. On the cross, God made it possible for us to be released from every curse. Man-made by the demons who fly in the flames of hell, to the evil angels that flitter above us, reminding us of our sin. Through Christ we have been redeemed. Galatians chapter 3, verses 13 through 14. Christ has redeemed us from the curse. Do you hear that? Christ has redeemed us from the curse of the law, having become a curse for us. For it is written, "Cursed is everyone who hangs on a tree, that the blessing of Abraham might come upon those and receive the promise of the Spirit through faith." Through faith. Remember that your tongue directs you because it's like a rudder. It leads you around by your nose unless you choose to bless rather than curse. Unless you choose to override your tongue. And you may say, I do that with my mind, and I won't deny that, but you also do that with your heart. When you have so trained your heart to be a kind voice in this world, that when you determine to say something, you first weigh out the necessity of saying those words. And sometimes the greatest choice and the greatest decision we've made, and this is coming from the guy who says every day, my big mouth, that you can choose to bless. That's why God says we have to decide in every circumstance what we will say. All kinds of animals, birds, reptiles, sea creatures are being tamed and have been tamed. Dogs can be tamed. I'm not sure about cats. I'm not sure if you can tame a cat. But you can train a tiger and a lion until they don't want to. Until they don't want to, you know. So a lot of animals can be trained. I once saw a guy put his head in the mouth of a lion. I think that's risky business. I think that's risky business. I can't imagine anything more foolish than that. So a lot of animals can be trained, but how do we train our tongue? How do we imprint upon our tongue saying the right thing? Well, James says we can't do it. So you might as well give up right now. You really can't. You really can't do it. Not by might, nor by power, but by my Spirit, says the Lord Almighty. In Zechariah chapter 4 and verse 6. The Jewish people and those that are Orthodox and Hasidic to this day pray 18 benedictions upon themselves 5 times a day. They pray 18 benedictions upon themselves 5 times a day. Now, we look at such repetition and we say, well, you know, that's just vain repetition. They say those things, it doesn't mean anything to them. They've been saying it all of their life. But I'm telling you, I think it could help. I wish I was in the habit of stopping 5 times a day and doing such a thing. I think I'd be a better person if I did. Because, Lord, help me. Me and my big mouth. Me and my big mouth. James provides us with a lot of hope. He tells us that the blessings and the cursings are relegated to a God who knows our circumstance. And that God, through Jesus upon a cross, has given us the ultimate blessing. And it's called faith. By faith we believe, and by faith we repent, and by faith we confess. By faith we are baptized by obedience, and by faith we rebuild the church after COVID. It is by faith that this building becomes full again. It is by faith. And we've got a choice to make. When we open our mouths, will it be a curse or will it be a blessing? And that will make all the difference. Let's stand and sing.